Hi Year 6, welcome to your first geography lesson. My name is Miss Paul. I am the head of geography at Preston Manor. So in today's lesson we're going to be looking at first what really is geography, why do we study it as a separate subject to other things? And secondly then we're going to be looking at a really interesting dilemma that we are facing in this world, and it links together quite a few different parts of geography. Now, this is maybe an issue that you've heard about before today, and maybe you've even done some action to try and make a change or solve this issue in your life. So, before we get started, I'd like you to get a piece of paper or a notebook and a pen just so that you can make some notes and do the activities as we go. Let's get started.
So, why is it important that we study geography? Well, geography is a fantastic subject to study because it incorporates so many different parts of understanding our world. From the scientific side of understanding our physical and natural world to understanding how we as humans interact with the world. How do we change the world, and how does the world change the way we live? It's so interesting as well because although the past of our world is really important for explaining how the world is today, it actually gives us a lot of opportunities to talk about the future and the things that we're going to solve or change in order to improve our lives, to improve the quality of our environment, and to really critically discuss the things that humans do. So there are 4 key elements to geography, as you can see here on the board. I've got my human elements, which is my people. All of the humans that live on this planet, including you and me, are part of the human element of geography. We're thinking about where populations are growing or shrinking in some cases. How do we live? Is that weird for us to live in cities, which are incredible environments, but completely man-made, built by us? How is it that we make change? We have governments. How is it that we're connected around the world through globalization, using food or resources that we have that maybe doesn't necessarily come from our local area, but if it comes from long distances away? How do we earn money, and how do we use our resources to do that? And sometimes we don't use our resources. How do we develop? How do we improve people's lives? What can we do to improve the quality of people's lives? And sometimes we're talking about the changes that humans cause to the world. So, for example, global warming is a human-created issue, but it's having an impact on the natural or physical world. So the physical world is maybe what you think of traditionally in geography. It's the rivers, the coasts, the soil, the weather that we get changes day to day, the incredible icy glaciers in the north and south poles, or even up mountains. It's the natural resources, gold and diamonds and oil that can be used as energy. And all of those different things together with the living world, our ecosystems, animals and plants. So all together, that is our physical world. And there's loads of stuff that happens on our planet without any human involvement whatsoever. If humans didn't exist, all of that physical world stuff would still be there. And understanding how it works and how it changes the face of our planet is part of what we're looking at when we do physical geography. To link these two together then is partly to look at environmental geography. Environmental geography says, how do humans interact with that physical environment? If there are natural resources available in our physical environment, how do humans use them? Why do we use them? Do we sometimes go too far when we do that? And sometimes we might want to look at things like protecting our environment or understanding the impact that we have on the physical environment, sometimes even how the environment has a physical impact on us. If the weather's ever gotten you down, that is definitely a factor of the physical environment or the affecting you. Then we have to look at our geographical skills. Now, geographical skills is not something that we might do, all in one big go, but it is a really important way to understand all of the information that we're looking at in geography. We're going to learn to read an atlas and maps. We're going to need to know where things are, the continents, countries, oceans, so that we can start to discuss how they're connected. Up next, we're going to be looking at the main content of our lesson today. And maybe this is an issue that you've talked about in school before today. We're going to be talking about the problems of plastic. And plastic is incredibly interesting human creation, very useful human creation, but it causes all kinds of problems for our environment. So we're going to be talking about the uses of plastic, the impacts of it on our environment, and possible solutions to problems that it causes. Before we get started, pop the title down on your page, the date today, and then task 1. So here I have an image and I'd like you to describe it in your own words. I'm just going to move my picture down a bit so that you can see it a bit better. Okay, so describing this image in your own words. What is the picture of? What does it show? What can you see? Pick out specific things. And then I want you to tell me, how does it make you feel? What does it make you think about? Put a couple of ideas down. I'll give you a moment. So if you've managed to do that, or even if you're still working on it, I'd like you to turn your attention to the second image down here. Now, this is a sort of blank map of the world, but more importantly, it's showing the oceans and some sort of diagram on that. Can you make a link between the image here on the right-hand side and the map at the bottom with those sort of circular shapes? Can you make a link between those two? Write down your link. I'll give you another 30 seconds or so to do that. Okay, so I hope that what you've written is something about the sheer volume of plastic you can see in this image. It is coming up actually through the water, and a lot of it is floating in the water. Despite this otherwise beautiful landscape in the background, this is kind of like an ugly scar on it. And it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. In fact, it seems to be building up. There's a large amount of trash here. And this plastic is of varying ages. You can see most of it is bottles, but not all of it. Some of them are shards or pieces. There's some wrappers back here. Okay, so there's huge amounts of plastic in the water. And what I've got here, this map, I hope that the link you've made is actually one of the reasons that plastic is becoming such a problem is that when it gets into the water, where it's been dumped in the water or released by accident, it's floating around the world. And so it's affecting not just the places where the plastic pollution was created in the first place, but spreading. And this is happening through ocean currents. If you don't know what an ocean current is exactly, if you've seen the movie Finding Nemo, you probably do. That bit when they go into the super fast flow of water in the East Australian currents, the EAC, they are traveling through an ocean current. And those ocean currents don't just help the migrations of sea creatures, but they also help to move around things like plastic, which are problematic for a lot of our sea creatures. So maybe you made that link between the bottles and plastic here being in the water and then being transported around through the world's oceans. So some of the plastic that we're talking about is not just on our coastlines, as in the previous image, but I hope you can see here, it's actually floating around in the middle of the ocean. And these are the piles of plastic swirling around. And as such, because it's all over the place, we could say that this is actually a global issue. It's not just one country polluting our oceans, and it's not just in one area of the world. It's happening everywhere. So one of the worst culprits for this problem is actually single-use plastic. Plastic we use for as little as like a couple of seconds before we bin it. I'd like you to think of all the things that are made of plastic that we use for a very short amount of time and then get rid of, whether we bin them or dispose of them in other ways. What kinds of single-use plastic can you think of? Write a list. So you might have a list right now. If you need some ideas, let's have a look at some then, shall we? So maybe you or your family get takeaway coffee or drinks from places. Maybe use plastic bags instead of reusing them. Perhaps you frequently drink water out of a plastic bottle and then just bin it. It might not be just water either. Pretty much any soft drink comes in a plastic bottle these days. Straws. This one's also a plastic cup. Sorry, my face is blocking it. Plastic cutlery, one of the worst things. We've all got cutlery at home. There's no reason we need to use plastic cutlery. Bubble wrap. Okay, it stops things breaking, but once you're done with it, how often do we really reuse it? Takeaway boxes or containers. Earbuds, if you've ever used those, why are they made of plastic? It doesn't necessarily need to be that way. It could be made of lots of different things. Even, perhaps surprisingly to you, your toothpaste. If you buy that toothpaste that's got those tiny little dots in it that you feel like are giving your teeth a really good scrub, actually, a lot of time, those tiny bits of little dots that are scrubbing your teeth are, in fact, plastic. And not only might you accidentally eat some of those, but they're going down the drain when you spit out your toothpaste and back into our water, where they're tiny enough that fish could eat them. And of course, cling film. Instead of putting it in a box in the fridge, we might wrap it up, put it in cling film. And yes, it does keep our food fresh. There's no question that a lot of these things are really, really useful. And that is actually going to be our next task. Before we do that though, I'd like you to circle 3 items you have on your list that maybe I didn't think of, or that I've got here on my list that you think are your top 3 plastic uses. So for you personally, what do you use the most? So I have to admit to you that my worst culprit is these plastic boxes, the earbuds, and probably the cling film. The others I try and avoid as much as possible, but those are my 3 most common uses. There's really no question of the benefits of plastic. It is all over the place in our modern world, and it is incredibly useful. It is light, durable, which means it doesn't break down easily, something that causes a problem in the long term, but is useful for us as humans, and it is easy to shape into a variety of different things. Such a variety, actually, that I want you to have a little look at these 10 items. I'd like you to see if you could put them into 4 categories for me. Places where we use plastic in transport, places where we use plastic in construction or building works, places where we use plastic for electricals or for packaging. So take about 2 minutes, pause the video, and can you please put these 10 things into the correct 4 categories? Off you go. So I hope that was okay doing that. I hope it wasn't too complicated to. So having looked at all of these different examples of where we use plastic in our daily lives, we can see it's not all bad, it's useful. And actually, it's really difficult to just get rid of completely. But something we can do is reduce the amount of plastic that we use, reuse some of it, recycle what we can. And if you can't reuse or recycle it, then we need to monitor it and bring it down. So as we've already mentioned, the main culprit of our plastic pollution problem is unnecessary, things that we don't need, single-use plastic, particularly in this category of packaging. Let's just check your answers then. So here's what I got down as the 4 categories. A little bit of a trick. The first whole row were all construction-based things. Then we've got 2 examples of packaging, 2 examples of transport uses, and 2 examples of electricals. So we're going to be looking at 2 major problems that are caused by the huge volume of plastic that we create on a regular basis. Now, the first of these is microplastics. And if we break this down, micro tends to mean things that are really, really small. So microplastics are exactly that. It happens when we get tiny, tiny pieces of plastic that are broken down. So although we might have something like a bottle cap, just to start off with, this as it goes into the ocean, can get broken down into tiny, tiny pieces called microplastics. And it's not just something like this which gets broken down, it's also small pieces of plastic, say, for example, one I gave you before about toothpastes, small pieces of plastic in cosmetics, or even if I was wearing a jumper or if my clothing is made out of a synthetic fabric, if the threads come off in the wash, that can contain plastic fibers that all go down the drain. Now, microplastics have been found in the stomachs of loads of different marine animals, animals that live in and near the sea. And eventually through the food chain, as tiny fish eat them, and then larger fish eat those, and then maybe a bird eats that, those microplastics are finding their way into our stomachs too. For example, if you eat shellfish, say for instance prawns or something like that, those shellfish are swallowing microplastics, and that could be ending up in your food, because if you eat a prawn, then you're eating that microplastic too. It's estimated that Europeans eat almost credit card size worth of plastic each year. So when you ingest plastic, when you eat plastic, even though you may not notice it, it can actually cause damage to our organs, particularly from the chemicals that come out of the plastic. And it's all really worrying, but there's something we can do about it. So we're going to talk about our second problem, and then we're going to talk about solutions. So our second problem is pollution, and this is maybe the more obvious one. It's certainly the one we started this lesson with. And what we're saying is that over the last 10 years, we've produced so much plastic, more than we had in the whole of the last 100 years. Every year, 8 million tons of this plastic that we produce is not necessarily kept in our homes or being used all the time like it is maybe in the seats of your car or the plastic in your car, but it's actually dumped into the ocean. And that amount is still going up. And this is what we really want to be dealing with as well. About half of the plastic we use, 50% of it, we only use it once, sometimes only for a few seconds or minutes, and we throw it away. And even though we've thrown it away, it remains in the environment. It may not be in our lives directly anymore. I might not have, say, for instance, my plastic bottle anymore, but it's going to be in the environment for hundreds and up to 1,000 years to degrade or break down. Of all the plastics that we produce, in terms of bringing them back in so we can recycle them or reuse them, it's only about 5% of the plastics that we produce. So really, really tiny portions. And the impact is really drastic. It's having an impact not just on sea life, but even seabirds. And over 90% of seabirds have plastic in their stomachs. Wildlife in the oceans and on the land are often tangled up in plastic, for example, birds or hedgehogs or dolphins. So those are sort of the dramatic images that we see. What I'm going to ask you to do as we watch this video is to write a subheading first before we start the video in your notes. And I want you to note down, please, 3 solutions that are discussed in this video. Okay. Now, if you didn't already get it down, because I actually didn't ask you to write anything down before, I'd like you to write down 2 facts about each of those 2 main plastic pollution problems. The first one was microplastics. The second one was plastic pollution. Actually, I'm going to put those back up on the screen just for a few minutes so you can make 1 or 2 notes. So here's your slide for a few notes. Feel free to pause. And here is your second slide, some notes on disposal and pollution of plastic. Just a couple of things to write down. Okay, and so now we're going to watch this video together. Now, while we're watching this video, I want you to note down the 3 solutions that are discussed. And I want you to be thinking, which of these solutions do you think is going to have the biggest impact, is going to make the biggest difference? Because they're all good things, they're all good solutions. Which one do you think will make the biggest difference? Let's have a watch.
We've all seen the videos. Birds with their stomachs full of plastic, that turtle with the straw stuck in its nose. I don't know about you guys, but I'm fed up with the plastic pollution and the harm it's causing our ecosystem. But the solutions of the future are being engineered by a small group of scientists in comparison to the amount of people who are polluting the earth. There's one easy way we can all start making a difference right now, and two ways that science has us covered for when we fail. These things right here are literally the devil. Okay, maybe not the devil, but seriously, single-use plastics, whether they be forks, spoons, knives, straws, whatever, they're all awful for the environment. And we use them on a semi-regular basis just because human beings prefer choosing convenience over mild inconvenience. But if there were ever one small thing we could all do to make a big impact on the environment, it's this. Stop using single-use plastics. Literally, just next time you go to a restaurant, drink directly from the glass. If you really need a straw or a person with a disability who uses a straw, you can use a straw alternative. Some popular options include reusable paper, silicone, or metal straws. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution, but there are options. Bring Tupperware and reusable utensils to work, use reusable bags for your groceries, and get a reusable water bottle. This stuff will actually save you money, and at the very most, it would only add a few minutes of dishwashing to your day. The impact of what you can do is real, and we need it to be real. Plastic has been found in more than 60% of all seabirds and 100% of sea turtle species that mistake plastic as food. And those detrimental effects quickly find their way back to humans. People who eat seafood end up consuming up to 11,000 tiny pieces of plastic each year. And that's only the ocean. That doesn't talk about anything that's happening in your own backyard on land. Back at home, plastic in all its forms are piling up in landfills because a whopping 91% of plastic isn't actually recycled. So you and I here are the problem because we're lazy and we don't want to sort our own trash. But what if we just stopped using one reusable plastic object a year? If every person in New York City used one less grocery bag per year, it would reduce waste by 5 million pounds and save $250,000 on disposal. That's just one piece of plastic less a year, not even one less a day. When it comes to what you can't do, science is attempting to handle the rest. One solution to the plastic problem is to attack its most detrimental part, how it breaks down. Many plastics aren't biodegradable and can take anywhere from 15 to 1,000 years to break down. But in 2016, researchers at Utrecht University developed a sort of super fungus, and it literally eats plastic once it's treated with some UV light. The mushroom devours the plastic over the course of a few weeks, and once it feeds, it's completely edible. It's a lengthy, incredible process that, though it won't fix our massive plastic problem, it could potentially offset how much waste we dump into landfills. Further research needs to be done before it becomes a commercially viable product that can start changing the world, but it's a really interesting solution. Six-pack rings end up choking marine animals and are a generally inefficient nuisance to the world. Their purpose is not even close to being outweighed by their environmental impact. So what's science going to do about it? Well, the team at We Believers, in cooperation with the Ocean Conservancy, have created edible six-pack rings. The rings are made out of barley and wheat remnants from the process used to brew beer. So it's not just positive for sea creatures, it's cost-effective and resource-effective as well. Reducing our dependence on plastic is a team effort. You and science are like the Wonder Twins, saving the future Earth from every plastic fork and straw floating in the middle of the Pacific. Together, we can get ourselves out of a very inconvenient environmental crisis.
So, we just watched that video, and hopefully you picked up on the three things. Now, the first of those things is something you or I as an individual can do, and hopefully are doing some of, to reduce the amount of plastic that gets produced and to reduce the amount of plastic that gets wasted and put into landfill and released into our environment. So, I hope that some of you have a reusable water bottle. I think that's a fantastic idea. And if you don't have one, then perhaps you can get one for September for school so that you're not using plastic bottles in the canteen all the time. Perhaps you and your parents take reusable shopping bags to the shops so that you're not getting plastic bags on all the time. Perhaps you make sure that you don't ask for a straw, or you take your own Tupperware when you need to get food from somewhere else. Whatever it is, there are loads of ways of us reducing our use of single-use plastic. The other two examples were pretty cool technological solutions, scientific advances that can help us find ways to deal with plastic. The first was a fungus, kind of like a type of mushroom. They're in the same sort of family tree, and those funguses, that fungi that they had developed there is able to break down or biodegrade the plastic itself. It's an incredible achievement, but that doesn't mean that we're going to be able to just plant mushrooms in our piles of plastic and have them all be eaten up. There has to be some other solutions as well. So that second one is about recycling or breaking down the plastic. The third one is about saying, okay, we actually don't need to make these some of these products out of plastic. What other things can we make them from that are not going to be a problem in the environment? We can reduce the amount of plastic that actually falls and that would be an amazing solution. Here are other things that we may be able to do to reduce our use of plastics, or some of the things we've already mentioned, maybe some of the areas that you've never even thought of. How this ban, for example, rather than using everything including on that toothbrush from bamboo, in the bin, when it gets old, actually it doesn't actually tiny pieces of plastic in the environment. Okay, so that's my goals. Have a little bit about these, about to say to you in very excited to meet you. Bye guys.